Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How to Use Incredible Transparency to Generate More Traffic, Trust, and Sales, with our special guest, Marcus Sheridan. Just a couple things before I hand this over. Our webinar will be probably around 45 minutes. Is that right, Marcus?
I hope so, but we'll see how it goes. You never know when I get going.
And at the end, there will be time for Q&A, and I'm sure you guys are going to have lots of questions after this webinar. So feel free to type those into the box that you see in your GoToWebinar window, and we will answer those at the end. There could be a chance where we'll ask them in the middle if you have some great questions that are pressing. We will get those to Marcus as well. But otherwise, plan on having some time for Q&A at the end. Just so you guys know, Marcus comes from the Sales Lion, and he has started his own pool company called River Pools and Spas, and through his own marketing efforts, including a fantastic blog that he has built up his business to be a really great business, and he has lots of tips for all of the small business owners out there for marketing your own business. And so, like I said, I am sure you guys will have some great questions after watching his presentation. I am going to hand this over to you, Marcus, but welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It is a pleasure, and I'm certainly excited to be with everybody today. We're going to have a good time talking about this. We're going to rock and roll, and I think we're going to provide a lot of useful information for everybody to apply to your business, and hopefully you'll feel like you can apply this to your business immediately, because ultimately that's what we want. So I'm going to start this off talking about this game that has changed for all of us. And of course that game is the way that we think, the way that we search, the way that we consume, the way that we shop, the way that we buy, and it's very, very different. And we're going to talk about how radical transparency affects that. And to start, I want to look at this number, and I think it's the most important number for all of us that are listening to this right now. That's 70%. Now, this 70% is representative of a study that Google did that goes back to the 0 moment of truth. Now, what is the 0 moment of truth? 0 moment of truth is that moment when a prospect walks into your store, or they call your company, or they fill out that email address. It's the moment they say, I trust you enough to give you my information and come to you. But the 70% represents this. We know, at least this is what the studies now show, that consumers have reached 70% of the buying decision before the 0 moment of truth. In other words, long before they contact us, they know pretty much if they want to do business or if they don't. And if this is the case, and we're all just going to have to agree that it is, and I'm sure you all would probably agree based on the way that you shop and consume, and based on the way that I do the same thing today, that we've got to do a lot of things. And of course, one of the first thoughts is, well, if we're going to meet them at that 70%, we better have a great website. But the thing is, nobody's ever defined what is a great website. I mean, it's like this hard thing to define. If I say to you, what is a great website, there's probably many definitions that you would come up with in your head. I want to talk about that today because there is an essence to what makes up a great website. And if we look at what makes up a great website, it's more along the principles of behavior that we have all established. So here's the facts, and this is how we have changed as consumers. Number one, we're more impatient than we've ever been when it comes to the way that we search online. When it comes to when we are vetting a business, we have questions and we have problems, we are more impatient than we've ever been. That's number one. Number two, because of that impatience, we're more demanding than we've ever been as well. If we don't feel like they are giving us what we feel like we deserve, we get mad. And number three, we're more loyal than we've ever been potentially. And when I say potentially, what I mean is, although we are very impatient with bad websites and bad copy and bad communication when it comes to companies, if we find a website that really speaks our language, speaks to us, truly solves our problems, we will stay there for a long, long time. And that's how the game has changed. Now, before we get into this, though, I always ask this same question, and this is important because everybody that is on the line today, everybody who's watching this webinar, is going to have to deal with this question. And that is, who here is the exception to everything I'm getting ready to say? I ask that because, generally speaking, there's two types of people in terms of the way that they receive information. If we're at a conference, it's the same way. If I'm speaking the same way, if you, in your business, you're going to present something new to a prospect or a client, it's the same way for you. And that is, the first person says, when you present something new to them, they say, that's awesome. Yeah, okay, I could see how we could apply that. Yeah, maybe we could try that. Yeah, I could see how that might be have a significant impact on our business. So that's the first one. The second one is the opposite of that. The second one says, no, I just don't see how that applies to us. And the reason why they say they don't see how it applies to them is because everybody likes to think that they're different. You like to think you're different. I like to think I'm different. But the reality is we are not different. The people that we're dealing with that make buying decisions are not different. Now, we like to think that. We like to call ourselves, well, I'm B2B. That makes it different. I'm B2C. That makes it different. Here where I live in the Northern Virginia and D.C. area, they have another one. It's called B2G, which is business and government. And we all like to say, I just don't know if this applies to us because, well, we are this. We are special. I'm asking you over the next 45 minutes to an hour that you never say to yourself, there's no way that we could do that. Instead, ask yourself, is it possible? And if you ask yourself if it's possible, we could do some pretty cool things. So how has the game changed? Let's look at a couple really quick. It used to be that if you were picking a restaurant, how would you pick the restaurant? Well, the number one way that we picked restaurants, other than asking friends, is we actually went to the restaurant. But today it's very, very different. Let me give you an example. Old Ebbitt Grill. This is in the D.C. area. And this is their home page. And I think it's very symbolic of the shift that we've had as consumers. When you go to a website, you have a problem. And you want a solution, and you want it immediately. That's what defines for you a great website. And that's why a great website can vary from person to person depending on the need at the time. What is unique about this homepage for Old Ebbitt Grill, it's very simple, but it's symbolic of the change because if you look at the bottom shows, hey, if you want to get an appointment, you can do it right now. You can do it immediately. You can make a reservation. In other words, if you have that problem, you can solve it right now. And their site has one other component that just shows the change. It used to be that restaurants never really put their menus on their websites, and then they started to put menus on their websites, and then they had to do something else, which is, of course, put prices on their menus on their websites. Now, why did they do that? Because they didn't do that before. And, of course, the reason why they didn't do it before versus now is because the game has changed. Your expectations as a consumer have changed. You expect these things, and it doesn't matter if you can afford it or not. You are going to be bothered if you go and vet a website tonight for a restaurant, and if they don't have a menu, and if they don't have pricing, it's going to bother you so much so that you probably won't go there. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. It's happening today. Same thing with buying a used car. When I say used car, what's the emotion that you experience? Chances are the emotion that you experience is a pretty negative one, and you should because they've done a lot of things to screw up their industry over the years. And CarMax realized that. Some of you have probably heard of CarMax before, and I love this slide. I just love it because it represents everything that is possible within each one of our companies. Your, mine, it doesn't matter what we do. But let's look at this. CarMax said, okay, what are the concerns that people have when buying a used car? We know they don't trust us. We know that they're worried about certain things when they show up to the lot. So what can we do to overcome those concerns? Well, I love this particular picture because a few months ago, it was actually last year, I started coaching my daughter's softball team who's 12. And once I started coaching, I realized that you can't possibly be a softball coach without a pickup truck. Otherwise, the back of your car is going to be a disaster with girls' equipment, gear, all this other stuff. So I had to buy a truck. I got up one morning. I said, I'm going to buy a truck today. I need to find a truck. I didn't go anywhere except CarMax. When I went to CarMax, I found exactly what I wanted. And a few hours later, I called CarMax up, and I said, hold this truck. Now, this is sight unseen. Just a few years ago, people, let's say 5 to 10 years ago, people would never have bought cars sight unseen online, but they are today. How is that possible? Well, we know it's possible because of a couple things. CarMax said the number one fear that people have when they are buying a car is that they hate to haggle. They feel like they're going to get ripped off. So we're going to make sure they have a no haggle price. There's going to be no trying to negotiate when they get here. That's the number one. The number two, and you can see it right under that, fear that they have is, I'm going to get a lemon if I get a used car. So they said, why don't we offer a 5-day money-back guarantee? Now, this is unheard of 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago. But CarMax said, well, why can't we do it? Why not? See, it doesn't matter how it was being done before. They said, why not? Because our only concern is the consumer. And then they, of course, they loaded up with all the photos, the good, the bad, the ugly photos of the video of the vehicle itself. They know the more they show you, the more you will trust them, and the more potentially you'll do business. And that's exactly why, instead of shopping around, that's the one car that I looked at, and that's the one car that I bought when I went through this experience. But if you had 10 years ago said to a group of used car salesmen, we should offer no haggle pricing, we should offer a 5-day money-back guarantee, we should show all the possible photos of the car that we can, good, bad, and ugly, what do you think they would have said? Well, you know what they would have said? That's stupid. That's crazy. We don't do that in this industry. But CarMax said it doesn't matter how it's been done before in the industry. We're going to change, and we're going to do it through transparency. So what's my point? Here's the reality of the digital age. It doesn't matter how Daddy did it. It doesn't matter how it's been done in your industry before. Sure, it's nice how it's been done before, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's been done the right way. And so I would ask you to consider, is it possible that there is a better way? Is it possible? And if there is a better way, are you willing to look beyond the rules? Because in each one of our industries, there's rules. I am here to tell you that if you go beyond these rules of what you think is kosher, not kosher, what can be done, not done, if you go beyond those and just allow your guiding light to be the consumer, the prospect, the customer, the person that truly is going to potentially or is currently doing business with you, if you base all your marketing decisions on that, then you're going to be successful exactly as CarMax was. But if you ignore it, we're going to have problems because ignoring never gets us anywhere, as we're going to see here soon. Now, my quick story. I used to be a pool guy. This is one of my swimming pools. It's a fiberglass swimming pool, and the company's called River Pools and Spas, and we started in 2001. And things were going okay for the company up until a particular date and number. Now, for those of you that own a business, you probably know what this date and number are, and for those of you that are in certain industries, you probably know what this represents. This was October 10th, 2008, the day the market crashed. If you can recall, during that time, Obama and McCain were debating about what to do with the banks, and it was a really bad time for consumer confidence, and it started what was a big spiral. And for me, it was disastrous because how do people get money to buy swimming pools? Well, the answer is they usually have a home equity line. They borrow it from the value of their home. And the problem was, after this day, we literally had 5 deposits that people had put down. They called us up, they withdrew those deposits and said, we just are too scared, we don't have confidence, we don't know about the loan, et cetera, et cetera. And so we lost $250,000 in business over 48 hours. And then over the next few months, it got worse and worse up until we got to this point right here. That was basically February of 2009. We were over the cliff. We were going to go out of business. Consultants were telling me, Marcus, you need to close your doors. And for the most part, it was done. It was done. I thought I was going to lose my home. It was the most stressful time of my life. This little webinar today, it's about principles that brought us back over that cliff. But it's the same principles that apply to you. I'm asking you to look at the principles here and see how they apply to your business. I promise you what you're about to see clearly does. Now, what's the opposite of what I'm getting ready to show you? Well, I call it ostrich marketing. Now, when an ostrich has a problem, what does it do? Well, it buries its head in the sand, right? And why does it do that? It does it because it thinks the problem is going to go away. But the truth is, the problem never goes away. Now, how does this apply to you? Well, I propose this. With every business, when it comes to their digital marketing, and when it comes to questions that they get asked by prospects, clients, and customers every day, many of them like to control the conversations. And so I would ask you, has there ever been a question that you all answer all the time within your company that you said, you know what, we probably should not address that on the website? Why don't we just wait till we're talking with the prospect or the client? Why don't we just wait till they come to the store? Why don't we just wait till we meet with them before we address that on the website? Have you ever done that? Chances are you're nodding your head yes. And if you haven't, you probably haven't pushed this hard enough, as we're soon going to see. At River Pools, our philosophy of how to get out of this mess that we were in came down to 4 simple words. These 4 words changed my life. I've been talking about these 4 words for over 4 years, and most companies still don't do them well. The 4 words are they ask, you answer. They ask, you answer. If you have ever been asked a question by a prospect or a customer, it's your moral obligation to answer it on your website, assuming it pertains to your industry. They ask, you answer. If you just follow this philosophy, it will settle so many issues. Now, some of you are saying, well, I can't address everything on my website because I have regulations. That's not true. You can address everything on your website. Now, how you address it, that's what depends. We're going to look at that too. But yes, even those of you that are in regulated industries, you cannot ignore the question because the ostrich does not win. In particular, if you want to be incredible when it comes to this thing we call content marketing, blogging, all this other stuff that we give it a name for, I need you to focus on 5 subjects. These are what I call the big 5. The big 5 are the subjects that move the needle in every single industry. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you sell, whether it's popsicle sticks or how to make popsicle sticks, it doesn't matter. These are the big 5. Cost, problems versus reviews, awards, best. These are the subjects that we search the most online. When we are vetting a company, a product, a service, a methodology, these are the ways most commonly that we search for those things. These are also the subjects that a huge amount of companies are scared to death to address. But again, the ostrich doesn't win. Let's look at this as an example. The money question. The money question. All right, I'm going to ask you this first. When you go online and you're researching how much something costs, which everybody that is listening to this webinar has, when you're researching cost and price of something, a service or a product, and you cannot find it on the website, what's the emotion you experience? How do you feel? I already know what you thought in your head. You said, I feel frustrated. I know you said that because everybody says that. Frustrated is the F word of the internet. Frustrated is the worst thing that our visitors to our website can experience, yet we put them through it all the time, and many companies put us through it. And the reason why you feel frustrated when you're researching cost and price is because you know that they know the cost and price. You know that they could address the question, but they haven't, so therefore now, because you know they're hiding it from you, you don't trust them. When we embrace this philosophy of they ask, we answer at River Pools, the number 1 question we used to get was, okay, Marcus, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? And of course, 4.5 years ago when we started this, how many swimming pool companies do you think had addressed this single question on their website? You probably know the answer is none. And the reason why they hadn't done it is they were afraid of the competition. They were afraid of scaring somebody away. They were afraid of all these things instead of being afraid of really irking the nerves of the visitor. And we said, you know what? We have this philosophy. We're going to follow it. So this was the first major article that we wrote. And we said, you know, it's kind of like buying a car. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of accessories. You know, and here's some ranges. But in reality, the answer is it depends. That's how much a fiberglass pool costs. It depends, but here's why it depends. In fact, it depends is the answer for every single one of you all right here. I would ask right now, how many of you, and I know you all get frustrated when it's done to you, but how many of you have addressed cost and price of your services or products on your website? Well, if you're shaking your head no, we have a problem because you're ignoring a question. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, how do we address it? Well, this is exactly how you address it. You are willing to explain why it depends. Now, in our case, because we were willing to explain why it depends, what happened? Well, let's look at some real results because I know you want real numbers. Everybody loves numbers. I love numbers, so we're going to look at lots of numbers today. So these are the main search terms that people found the River Pool site with from March of 2009 to June of 2012. If you look at the red ones, they are keywords that came off of cost-related questions. And so if somebody went to Google and typed in fiberglass pool prices, 13,000 people did that, they would find that article that we wrote because Google looked at that article like, finally, somebody's addressed this daggone question that people are searching for every day, and nobody was addressing it. So, of course, we ranked #1 for it, and because we addressed it, because we ranked for it, because we started getting those visitors, now we started to get lots of leads. So these leads are people that said, we want an appointment with you. They filled out a form. We started tracking them, etc., right? So all of these appointments right here that you see would not have happened had that one single article not been written. That's very important. That article doesn't get written. None of these happen. None of these happen. But because it was written, we do know the names of the people that actually bought. And because we know that this article so far has made us over $2 million in sales. $2 million that we would not have had if we had not have addressed this question. $2 million, all because we were willing to say, it depends. It depends on how much it costs. Everybody that's listening to this right now needs to say, okay, how many different types of cost and price related questions do we get? And again, this is not about you. It's not how much do you charge. That's not the question. The question, if I don't know you exist, is how much does it cost for X, that thing that you sell? How much does a fiberglass pool cost? How much does email marketing cost for small businesses? These are the types of questions that we should be answering on our websites. We should never ignore them. And if we don't, we'll get the reward. That's the first one of the big 5. You've got to be willing to address that. You've got to be willing to explain why. It depends. Looking at another one, the problem with problems. Okay. So people love to find out what's wrong with stuff, what's wrong with products, services, methods, companies, etc. And generally speaking, if somebody asks you, they came to you and said, okay, I kind of like your proposal, but what are the potential problems that I might deal with? What are the potential issues I might deal with? How do you respond to that? Most of us don't like that question, and we don't respond very well, and we certainly don't address it on the front end. So how many times over the years, getting back to pools for a second, how many times over the years do you think I've been asked the question, Marcus, okay, be honest, what are the problems with fiberglass pools? Because I've been hearing things. Of course, I had heard that lots of times. And do you think that I had ever bothered to address it on the website? Well, no, because I didn't want to scare people away from fiberglass. But instead now of following that same fear pattern, because we had embraced this philosophy as they ask, we answer, we said, okay, people keep asking us about the problems with fiberglass pools. We need to address them. So we addressed it. We did it with an article, the top 5 fiberglass pool problems and solutions. And we said in that article, you know what? A fiberglass pool might not be for you. It might be too skinny. It might be too short. It might not be deep enough. It might not be long enough. So we said all the reasons why they might not want it. But at the same time, we said, but if you're looking for a pool that's less than 16 by 40 feet, that's less than 8 feet, that is very, very low maintenance, and it's going to last you a lifetime, and it's going to look great in your yard, well, then fiberglass pool might be a great fit for you. But it depends. So once again, the answer was it depends, but we explained why. But because we explained why, because we wrote about the subject, here's what happened. This is a list of the #1 keywords that generated leads for river pools in 2012-13. So the #1, whoops, I did it again. The #1 keyword that generated appointments, if you look here, was river pools and spas with 56 appointments. Well, that doesn't really count because those people already knew who we were, right? So if you take that one away, all these other search phrases are simply from people that were trying to get a question answered. In this case, we know that 9,000 people typed in the phrase fiberglass pool problems. Of those 9,000, 32 became a lead. And because we know the names of those 32 people, we know that that article made us over $500,000 in sales. It's $500,000 in sales we would not have had we not been willing to address the issues with our stuff. Has anybody ever asked you these types of questions? If they have, you need to address them on your website. Let's look at another one. This is the third one of the big 5. I love 80s movies, don't you? So here's how it works. We love to compare things online. We love to say, what's the difference between this and this? How does this compare versus that? And we do it all the time. So to give you an example with pools. Now, You notice I keep using pools. Some of you might be thinking, why does he keep using pools? This is not about pools, y'all. This is about your business, because you've been asked comparative-based questions all the time. Pools is just fun to talk about, and it's easy to explain, so we're just going to use that. But this isn't about pools. You'll see the Big Five apply to you if you really get your brain working on it. So, versus questions. Let me give you an example of this. I have been asked all the time over the years, back when I was still a pool guy. And by the way, I'm not a pool guy anymore, y'all. I still have this company. I'm a silent partner. But today I just talk and teach about and consult about marketing because it's so fun. And so people used to ask me all the time, Marcus, be honest, what's the difference between a fiberglass and a concrete pool? Now, if you were wondering that, and if you went online, what would you type? Of course you would type fiberglass versus concrete pools, or concrete pools versus fiberglass pools, or concrete pools compared to fiberglass pools. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, how many swimming pool companies do you think had addressed that question on their website? Once again, the answer was 0. Why? Fear. It makes no sense. So our philosophy was, look, we're getting asked this all the time. Sure, there's some benefits to concrete over fiberglass. Why don't we honestly answer it? And because we honestly answered it, we wrote an article, Fiberglass versus Concrete versus Vinyl Liner Pools, an honest comparison. And it was an honest comparison. And once again, we said why people would want to choose concrete over fiberglass, why they would choose fiberglass over concrete, and why they would choose a vinyl liner in-ground pool over the others. This is the key to what I'm saying. You've got to be honest and transparent. You can't be schlepping your stuff. You've got to be real, because people can sniff it out. Just like you can sniff out when somebody's very biased online, your customers, prospects, clients can too. And so you need to produce content that is truly unbiased and presents the facts and then backs off. If you go online today and you search any versus-based questions about pools, you're going to have an article shown to you by River Pools and Spas. And it's because we weren't afraid to address the question. And go to the article. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. We are truly honest in terms of the benefits of concrete over fiberglass. I'm asking you, how many times over the years have you been asked to compare anything? Whether it's 2 products you sell, 2 services you sell, 2 methods you sell, you versus another person, competitor, etc., etc. It's time to start answering these. That's the third element of the Big Five. So just to review, we talked about cost, we talked about problems, and we talked about versus/comparison-based questions. Hopefully, your brain is percolating right now with ideas of stuff you should be writing about, stuff that's going to move the needle instead of just another silly blog post that doesn't get much results. Okay, so another one, awards and reviews. We love to search for reviews. We love awards. That's how people work. We love to know the best. We love to rank things. Just like we love those articles, Consumer Digest, Best Buy Awards, Motor Trend Car of the Year. You like those, don't you? Yeah, I like them too. Well, how many of those types of magazines, publications for awards and such do you think are in the fiberglass pool industry? Well, of course, the answer is 0. There's none. And knowing that 4 years ago when we started this process of They Ask, We Answer, and thinking exactly like a consumer thinks, we said, all right, people love these award systems. There are none in our industry. So what do you think we did? Jill, what do you think we did?
You started your own awards.
Yeah, I started my own award. And by the way, what gives me the right to do that, Jill?
You can do that. You have experience, you have knowledge, you can do that.
What gives me the right to do it is the fact that I did it. That's what gives me the right to do it. And that's the beauty of the internet. You don't have to ask permission to do cool things. You just have to be willing to think differently than anyone has in your industry, especially in terms of transparency. And so I said to myself, okay, people are always asking me, what are some of the best shapes of fiberglass pools by the different manufacturers? Because in the fiberglass industry, it's kind of like Ford, Chevy, Toyota. You got all these manufacturers, and then you have dealers that are like car dealers, except shell dealers, where we just install the shells in the ground. And generally speaking, you carry 1 or 2 different manufacturers. So I said, okay, I'm going to come up with an award system for the best small in-ground fiberglass pool designs. And I'm going to look at all the manufacturers, 90% of which I compete against, and I'm going to give them awards based on my opinion of what I feel are the best shapes. And I was completely honest. Best small kidney-shaped pool, best rectangle pool, best this, best that, etc. So you might be thinking to yourself right now, my goodness, this is weird. Well, it is kind of weird. And how do you think the competition reacted to this? Because the competition is saying, wow, this guy just gave us an award. But at the same time, he's selling against us, and they were confused. So what do you think their main reaction was? I'll ask you, Jill, what do you think their number 1 reaction was all these manufacturers, these big old Goliaths in the industry, to getting these awards?
My guess would be they said, how can he do this?
Well, here was the #1 reaction. This is pretty funny. I'm going to show you some stats here. So here's that article, and these are real numbers. That article has been, at this today, it's actually been read about 20,000 times. And today it's got over 200 inbound links. The majority of the manufacturers, when they heard this and saw this, were announcing on the home page of their website that they had won an award for best pool in class. Linking back to the article, and that's where the inbound links comes in. This article has over 200 inbound links today, the majority of which are coming from the competition. And so people say, well, Marcus, aren't you afraid that you just introduced them to the competition? No, I'm not afraid of that. Because if somebody wants to know who the competition is, like, how long is it going to take them to find that out? We need to stop living in a world where we think people cannot find what they're looking for. Consider the opposite. Consider being the go-to source of all that information. Let's look at another one of these. Again, this is way outside the box, y'all. I told you I was going to shift your thinking a little bit about transparency. Radical transparency. I really mean it, the best. Have you ever been asked, so what's the best such and such in your industry? What's the best this? What's the best that? What's the best company? What's the best method? What's the best restaurant for Mexican food in the Washington, D.C. area? We love to search for best related phrases on the internet because we're so obsessed with best. So, as you thought about these questions, let me ask you this. If somebody ever says to you, okay, we like you, but if we didn't use your company, who are some others that you would recommend? Like, who are the best in the area that you might recommend? That's a great question, isn't it? Because we always come up with the craziest answers when people ask us that question. We tend to hide from it or make up silly answers. Some of you that are listening to this say, well, I actually answer honestly, Marcus, and that's great that you do. Do you do it on your website? You know, I used to get questions all the time. Let's say when I was still a pool guy, I was in Richmond, Virginia, and I was selling a swimming pool, and somebody would say to me, okay, Marcus, we like you, but who else would you recommend in the Richmond area? Now, remember, the philosophy is they ask, we answer. I got the question, I better answer it, because if somebody has asked me personally, another 1,000 people have typed that same question online. So I wrote an article, and that article was titled, Who Are the Best Pool Builders in Richmond, Virginia? Reviews/Ratings. And if you notice this article, it's 2 of the big 5 in it, Best Pool Builders and Pool Builder Reviews. Now, when we did this, we came up with a list of 5. Now, am I on that list of 5? Jill, what do you think? Am I on that list of 5?
I'm going to say no.
Now, why would you say no?
Well, because you already know you're the best. Right? And the people who are doing the research have already come to your website, and they already know something about you. So I'm guessing that you didn't put yourself on the list.
Well, it's kind of a yes. What's kind of a yes and no, what you just said. So here's the thing. No, I'm not on the list. You're exactly right. But this person may have just landed on the website. They might still not know who River Pools is. And they read this list, but here's what happens. If somebody reads a list where you put yourself on a best of anything, what happens to trust? Well, of course we know what happens. The trust goes away. You're no longer the expert. You're no longer that voice of reason. But instead, if you say, you have a question, here's an honest answer to what we think. Now you say, well, what's the result of this? Well, if anybody goes online today and types in Best Pool Builders Richmond, Virginia, which is a prolific phrase, of course we show up for that. But here's where the rubber really meets the road. Let's say you went online today and you typed in the phrase, reviews, play more pools, Richmond, Virginia. Once you got past the sponsored search, that yellow box that nobody clicks on anyway, the first one you're going to see is that same article from River Pools. And so today, River Pools, when people are vetting our competitors, shows up for the majority of those searches, the majority of those conversations that are being had. Now, some of you say, well, again, aren't you scared that you have introduced now the competitor to your prospects? No. In fact, here's the type of results that we've gotten. I had a lady come to me last year. She said, the most interesting thing happened, Marcus. I was fist close to signing a contract with Play More Pools, and I decided to go online and vet them. And when I went online to research them, I stumbled across this article about the best pool builders, and I saw you all, and I was like, wow, these guys are so honest. Maybe I should call them too. And of course, you know what happened with that lady, because otherwise it wouldn't be a great story. Yes, she bought, and lots of people have bought directly off of that article that had no idea who River Pools was before they searched the question, best pool builders or reviews of XYZ company. For you local businesses out there, this is a killer, incredible, effective local SEO strategy. For you national ones, it works the same. But you can't be afraid to address the best questions. It might be about a competitor. It might be about a product. It might be about a service. I don't care. But you get it all the time. You've got to be willing to address it. So here are the top 8 pages of the River Pools website today. And if you look at the top 8 pages, 5 of the top 8 are in the big 5. Fiberglass swimming pool pricing and cost guide. How much do above ground swimming pools cost? Top 5 fiberglass pool problem solutions. Fiberglass pool prices. How much is my pool really going to cost? Fiberglass pools versus vinyl liner pools versus concrete pools, an honest comparison. Do you see that our homepage is the 5th most viewed page on our site? And that's the way, if you really understand content marketing, if you really follow this philosophy of they ask, you answer, then you're going to get this vision. You're going to really understand how this works. And it works in other industries as well. I mean, lots of industries. I'll just show you a couple real quick. So this company here is called Block Imaging. Now, they're a client of mine, and they came to me and they said, Marcus, we're not getting any traction with our blog. Our traffic is not growing, and we're not the thought leaders that we need to be. Now, what Block Imaging does is they do refurbished medical imaging equipment. So they'll take an old MRI machine that's been thrown out to pasture, they'll refurb it, and they'll sell it, of course, much cheaper than a new one, to a hospital organization that can't necessarily afford a new one. That's what they do. And their chief content officer came to me and said, oh, my goodness, we're just not having any action. And so I said, it's very obvious. You have not embraced the big 5. And so they embraced the big 5 in a major way. Now, here are the top pages on their website. MRI machine cost and price guide. CT scanner price guide. How much does a CT scanner cost? How much does a used MRI machine cost? And how much does a PET CT scanner cost? Now, none of that stuff probably means anything to you all. It's the principle of the thing. Now, they also have really started to embrace reviews and comparison-based articles as well. They're doing incredible things. I talked to them recently and asked them, based on your measurements, because they use advanced analytics like a HubSpot, a Marketo, whatever it is, I don't care what you use, but you need advanced analytics beyond Google Analytics. That way you can track the true numbers of what you're making on this stuff. I asked them, how much are you making based on the leads you've generated from these articles? And the chief content officer said, we know at a minimum so far we've made over $9 million in sales that we probably would not have had had we not addressed these critical questions that have brought the leads into the funnel and that have developed us as a thought leader in this industry. Block Imaging is crushing it against some of the Goliaths in their industry, even though they're just a little digital David, because they're thinking differently. They're more transparent than everybody else. And oh, by the way, the answer to all these little red arrows that you see on the screen is it depends. But they explain why. Look at another one right here. This is a great company. It's Yellow Appliance in Boston. And they have one of the largest retail companies for kitchen appliances and lighting and things like that. Same situation. The CEO came to me and said, yo, Marcus, we're not getting any action. Help us out. And they've been blogging, but they had not been focused on the subjects that move the needle, especially the big 5. And so they really mastered this because they have lots of products. I mean, it's so easy for them to come up with these types of questions. And so they wrote articles like best microwave drawers, reviews and ratings. And of course, if you go online today and you search for microwave drawers or reviews of the best microwave drawers or anything like this, which you all think to yourself right now, well, that's really specific, that's really niche-y. Well, exactly. That's how you need to think when you produce content, because that's the way your customers and your prospects are thinking as well. That is the magic to this. Very, very, very powerful. And of course, here is their most successful articles. A little bit different than the one we just looked at, but their top viewed articles are things like 33-inch counter depth refrigerators reviews ratings, the best 30-inch counter depth refrigerators. Look, you think that's the same thing. No, it's actually different. The 5 best affordable luxury appliance brands, the best induction cooktops of 2013. I could go on and on and on. These are so niche specific, but they are crushing it because they are addressing the big 5 so effectively as a company. I want to reiterate that what we just described isn't just about regular B2C companies. I know that was one, Black Imaging was a B2B, this was a B2C. I don't care if you sell services, it works exactly the same. It works the same every time. For river pools, when we started this process and we were over the cliff that I talked about earlier, this is where we were in February of 2009. The red indicates pay-per-click. The green represents organic search results. At the time, we were getting no organic search results, barely. We started this philosophy of they ask, we answer. We went into the off season. We started getting more traffic, started answering more questions, went into the full season. And then you see this yellow. This yellow represents inbound links coming or visitors from other websites. Today, Riverpools has thousands of inbound links coming from other websites, and we've never tried to get an inbound link in our life. It's happened because we've addressed the subjects that other people simply aren't willing to address. We've been willing to talk about them. And remember, just because you address it doesn't mean you specifically have an answer. Some of you that are in regulated industries are thinking about that right now. Addressing is different than necessarily answering. Do your best to address the thing. If that means answering it specifically, fine. Generically, fine. But today, River Pools and Spas is the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world, and it's not even close. And all we have is 15 little employees in good old Podunk, Virginia, and we dominate an entire industry because of the fact that we were the first ones that said, let's be the best teacher in the world at what we do. I want to close with one little story, and then I'll take your questions because I love questions, and they're awesome. And hopefully, do we have any questions, by the way, Jill?
We don't have any so far, but I have questions.
Okay, well,
and that will probably help generate them.
Yeah. Start thinking, guys. Start thinking about the questions. So, I shared this principle of transparency at the beginning of 2013 at a conference, and when I shared it, this reporter came up to me and said, Marcus, this whole idea of just being utterly transparent with the way that you teach online and answering every question is fascinating. I think I want to do a story on it. I didn't think anything of it until a few days later. One of the reporters from his organization called me. We spoke for 90 minutes. Then they sent down a photographer to take pictures at my swimming pool site. And then the next week, on the cover of the small business section of the New York Times was this article right here. Now, here's the funny thing about this article. Other than the fact that shirt really makes me look fat, which I still am bothered about, but that's okay. If you look at the title to the article, the irony is a revolutionary marketing strategy. Answer customers' questions. I would ask you, is there anything revolutionary about answering customers' questions? Well, in principle, no. But in practice, yes. Very much so, because nobody does it well. I'm asking you to do it better than anybody else. This was the #1 shared and emailed story for the business section of the New York Times for 3 straight days. I got over 1,000 personal emails from people around the world on the sales line from this article, and they said, Marcus, I read this, and I tell you, you just did what I felt like we should always have been doing in the first place. And that's all I'm asking you to do today. I'm asking you to be more honest and open than anybody else. I'm asking you to let go of your secret sauce, to show it to the world, to change your industry, to do it differently than it's always been done. And if you do that, my commitment to you is that everything will change. And that's that. And now I'm ready for your questions. And that was exactly 45 minutes.
That was awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. This was great. Just a little insight for people listening. My manager saw Marcus do a presentation last year, and she was just so blown away. She wanted him to come and do it for our customers as well. And I have taken away a lot of stuff from the presentation. I loved at the beginning when you were talking about how websites are for customers and not for you. I don't think you specifically said that, but that's what I got out of what you said. And
yes.
What problem can your website solve for your customers or potential customers? I think that's a great thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about your website. I think people are so concerned about getting their products or getting their services up there that they forget that the people who are looking at them are there for a specific reason. And if you're not solving or answering their questions or solving their problems, then they can go someplace else.
The other week I was with like 17 different. I did a little live thing workshop with 17 different businesses, And of those 17, I did an experiment. I showed the homepage in a quick like fast forward way on a slide deck. I said I want everybody to look at the homepage of what you're going to see on the screen, and within 5 seconds you have to tell me the problem that this company solves. Okay? And we did this, and I did rapid fire, and I said 5 seconds, you got to tell me. And of course there was about 75 people in the audience, and out of the 17 websites, this is incredible, Jill, only one company was a clear, this is the problem we solve. Everybody else, it was confusing to the people in the audience as to the problem that company solves. And so nobody speaks in terms of problems, but that's the first thing that should be on the homepage of your website. What is the problem that you solve in my language, not yours?